Hi, guys. Thanks for coming. So just one thing is I might be looking at my phone. I am not Instagramming, but I did write some questions down here. So anyway, who here, first of all, has bought something that they've seen online advertised by an influencer? Okay, so a few of you, maybe 25, 30%. Why don't we start by saying, why do people buy stuff for influencers? For those who have never purchased something, James, you know better than anyone. This is a pretty big market, a growing sector of the economy. Can you talk a little bit about, why people purchase things from influencers and just the scale of this industry?
Yeah, I think part of it is that, for influencers like Sai, she's built her following giving advice to her audience for years and years. So there's like a trust thing. So I think that like, if you've never bought something from an influencer because you saw an influencer post about it, think about the friend you have in your group that you text when you need to go to like the right restaurant, and you don't want to screw it up, and you like know the person. Like that is what influencers are for people. They just don't know them, but they do feel like they have that relationship. So I think, when Sai says, hey, this is what I'm wearing or this is my skincare routine, there is like this inherent trust between the audience and her that isn't like transactional, right? It's not like seeing an ad. It's more like your friend saying, you should pay attention to this and buy this. And I think for a lot of influencers' audiences, they have been right a lot. Like they've probably purchased multiple things and they've been happy with those purchases. And so they're each time more inclined to trust them. So for advertisers, it's obviously, kind of a holy grail to be able to say like, I'm going to essentially pay someone to talk to, hundreds of thousands of people who feel like they're friends with this person and trust them and have them say, hey, you should pay attention to this product.
So James, you run FOR, which is a kind of influencer marketing company. You work with a lot of influencers like Sai and Kelly. And you guys, Sai and Kelly, are both content creators yourself. So you're out influencing people daily. Can you talk a little bit about what the job entails and the work that goes into it and sort of maybe a little bit about how you got into this whole world?
Sure. I think that there's a little bit of a misconception that we actually work. I think people think that we just kind of take pretty pictures and then relax and hang out. But I think what you fail to realize is that we're always on 24/7. So it's not only are you every day out, you're sales. You're out doing sales, so you need to get your next check. On top of that, you are creating your editorial calendar. You shoot all of these things ahead of time. You're not just getting a photographer and someone's following you around all day. Everything needs to be strategically done. On top of that, you are checking emails. You are answering all the people that follow you because they follow you for a reason. So you have to keep up with your organic content. You are doing anything from showroom polls, you're doing meetings, you're doing late night events, and the list goes on, and it's very tiring, I have to say. It's exhausting. And I think you won't know until maybe possibly following an influencer around and being in their shoes for a day. But I will say it is a very entrepreneurial job, and it takes maybe, I want to say anywhere between 10 to 15 hours a day is what you're putting into it.
Yeah, I often say that we are accountants, we're publicists, we're stylists, we're lawyers, we're everything to ourselves. And it's tiring. It is absolutely exhausting. And we work 24/7. So
Amber, you kind of work in this industry too, but from a different angle. You at one point were, I would call you an influencer yourself. You were on a hit show Made in Chelsea. You, founded a very successful e-commerce company, and now you run Zypher, which, can you talk a little bit about maybe how it's different than a traditional influencer marketing agency and why you have a different view on things maybe?
Yes. So I would ask, how many of you have bought a product or watched a Netflix show because a friend recommended it to you? Almost 100% of the room. So what I would say is Zyper's positioning is that we are a community marketing platform. So we help brands identify their super fans, their genuine everyday consumers who love the brand, whether that's Kellogg's cereal or Tom's shoes, and turn them into this community. And they don't have to be public brand ambassadors. It's more like a focus group 2.0 for brands where they can get real-time insights and maybe do creative content challenges, but really with their true fans versus influencers.
Professional influencers, you mean, right?
Professional influencers.
Got
yes.
it. So, with I guess like with an effective ad, whether it's from, a very loyal member of the community or an influencer, what makes an effective ad, from someone on social media? What are we've all seen the hashtag spawn, hashtag ad, but what makes a really good, compelling ad? James, do you have thoughts on this?
I have many thoughts. I mean, I think there's like a lot of very basic stuff that, you need to kind of jump the hurdle first of just like, is it the right person, right? Like, there was this thing going around in social last week of this brand that sent offers out to a bunch of influencers to advertise a baby stroller, but they didn't have kids, So it's like, okay, first of all, you have to make sure that like this is the right person. So let's say we get over all those hurdles and we like, pick someone who could actually use the product. I think something we've been harping on a lot recently is like making sure the influencer actually uses it. So like as more money is flooded into this space, brands and the agencies they work with are briefing influencers, and you guys have probably seen this change over the last few years, where a couple years ago they'd give you the product and they'd say, okay, I'll pay you or won't, do a post. Now it's like, here's the exact language I want. Here's all the key messaging. Here's kind of what the key features of the product is that I want you to hit, and you don't even have to use the product to be able to do a post about it. And so what has happened is like, because influencers don't have to use the product, sometimes they don't, and then there's like no personal story to it, there's no connection to it. And so then you really have influencers like holding a moisturizer up next to their face being like, I love this moisturizer, hashtag ad. And it's like, that is total trash. And the brand is like, might as well just like set their money on fire. So we try and make sure that like in all the campaigns we're running that influencers have time to use the product and find a personal story and a way to connect it to them in a way that feels authentic. So Sai, and I'll keep using her just because I know her and we're friends, can say like, hey, I've got 2 kids, I'm running around, like this product has been great because I don't have a lot of time in the morning. And so like, I can just throw this on and it feels really great and it's good. So it's like that creates this connection to the product that is real instead of her just like spewing out whatever the brand said is what makes this product great.
I think the onus is also on the influencer to know what will work for them and what won't, and to try to build that story, because a lot of people will just take the money and know that it won't make sense, but they're like, I'm just going to take this paycheck because it's being tossed at me. So I think it's up to us too to be a lot more responsible about what we choose to do.
Yeah, what is what is that line between authenticity and just performing for the audience, and do you ever worry about selling out? Do you only advertise products? How do you kind of evaluate your brand deals? Do you only work with companies that you're very familiar with, that you yourself use, or are you open to kind of new deals, and how do you strike that balance?
I'm lucky enough to be able to come on board and say, hey, that's not the right product for me. So if it's something that I feel is not organic or not authentic, I won't take on the partnership. And also executing, back to what you said earlier, executing a really good campaign, I need time to test the product. Or for example, at least if I'm not talking about the product, on my stories, I like to have it in the background. If I'm doing a nighttime skincare routine, it's in the background. I'm not specifically speaking about the product, but you see it. And followers notice everything, especially on YouTube, every little thing. So if they see something constantly, they know that I'm using it. And I don't want to mislead anyone, because at the end of the day, a consumer is more likely to buy because their friend recommended it. And then influencers in people's heads are their friends. And we just have that relationship. So the minute that I take on a brand that isn't authentic to me, my followers can see right through that. For example, I'm not a big fan of GMO or non-organic foods, let's say. And then the next thing you know, I'm taking my kids to McDonald's. It's a lie. So, again, I think when a brand partners with someone, they just need to know their standards, their morals, what they're about, and then you need to come on and say, okay, is this the right partnership?
Amber, why is now the era, or any of, love to hear you guys chime in too, but why is now the era of the social media influencer? I feel like, for a lot of people, maybe people here, they've just really started to hear about this in the past year or two. But it seems like it's been bubbling for a while. James, you have been in the influencer industry, I think, also longer than anyone. So I'd love to hear from both of you guys, why now, and where do you think it's, coming from?
I think the barriers to entry are just so low now. You don't need to be an actress. You can build your brand on social media, and in that way, influence has been so democratized. So Gen Z know that they can, create a brand on social and become an influencer and buy followers and, start getting free stuff from brands. Whereas I think our position in Zyper and why we've had a lot of traction so far is that there's this kind of return to wanting to work with real people and really validate that they have a connection to the brand. So instead of us having a pool of talent that say, oh yeah, we'd love to work with Dior, we will do the data deep dive for Dior and say, okay, right, let's analyze social, let's analyze your customer database and find who are your real genuine fans that genuinely buy the product, that are posting about it and engaging with you. And then we go back to the brand and say, okay, here are your real fans, versus people being able to put themselves up for that brand deal.
I guess I'm kind of curious in light of you mentioned teens, and I feel like a lot of teenagers, brand deals are aspirational for them, and they'll just relentlessly post about a product in hopes that the expectation is that the brand will eventually notice them. Is that something that you correct for, or how do you kind of determine who's really in it and who's just posting about it obsessively because they want that pedigree of having a brand deal with Evian or something?
Yeah, and there's so many granular metrics that we need to look at that's not just content recognition, like have they got the logo on their feed or have they mentioned it in their comment, but how often are they truly engaging with it? Have they actually bought anything from it? Are they going to the locations of the brand to identify a real connection? But it's still a challenge, I think, to really define, are they authentic? But it's something that we're still trying to work on every day.
James, I'm curious to hear from you. What are some surprising turns the industry has taken recently? Can you talk a little bit about, sort of a little bit for people who don't know, maybe some more of the history of influence and what role do these platforms play?
Play obviously a huge role. I think kind of to kick off from your other question, I think, this world is not new at all. I think a lot of the influencers you see now, 20, 30 years ago, maybe they would have been the accessories editor at Vogue or something like that, right? And so there's always been influential voices. I think that it's just that individuals couldn't achieve scale, enough scale to attract advertising without something like a Vogue or a magazine, a TV show, a radio station or something like that. And what's happened in this space is no different than the music industry, where you couldn't be a popular band if you didn't get on the radio, and you couldn't get on the radio unless you had a record label that could get you in front of the radio station. So the only way to be a successful musician was to get signed to a major label, and you were at the whims of what those labels wanted to do. And then the internet obviously kind of blew that up to allow kind of the direct access between fans and musicians. Same thing here. It's just that they don't have to go through magazines anymore. And magazines in a lot of ways created, I think some of the earliest influencers making money were beauty vloggers. And a big part of it was that when Vogue was here's how you do a cat eye, it was just always white women, right? And so then these other bloggers or people were hey, if you're South Korean, this is how you do a cat eye. It's different, and there's no content for us out there, and so we're going to create this space. And then 10 years after that started, Vogue was oh shit, we're we're screwed because we've missed this whole thing. So I think that as you said, democratization of it, and the fact that people can get their own scale has been the really kind of thing that's changed a lot. But the actual influential voices thing is always been is kind of always been there. As far as what's been surprising, I would say I was surprised at some of the hate thrown at influencers, but I'm not that surprised. Ever since I started this company 7 years ago, and as you said, I was a Tumblr blogger back, I don't know how long ago. It was a long time.
James is the OG Tumblr.
I was OG before obviously there was any money in the space. But there's always been the articles of just every year it's this new thing of like the bubble is bursting, and like that article comes out and then the budget's double, and then the death of the blogger, and that comes out and the budget's double again. So like there's this like traditional media trying to invalidate what influencers do because it's a threat. All the while brands being like, oh wow, this is working really, really well. I'm going to keep pouring money into it. So
one thing that brands are pouring money into more is micro-influencers and people with sort of smaller, more niche markets. Amber, how does that fit within your business strategy? You know, are these sort of friends and people that you're identifying, are they ultimately just micro-influencers?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's macro, micro, nano now as well. And I think people who are fans of a brand that are working with brands through Zyper they have full-time jobs, and they're not trying to be an influencer. They're working in an art gallery, they're a paramedic, and they're not a blogger or trying to get sort of brand deals. It's more that they just love this brand and they've been recognized by Banana Republic and now they can work with them. And so I think it's to do with follower numbers as well. So I mean, people who are brand fans often don't have a lot of followers. Like, we don't even really look at that. You know, they might have 300 followers, but they really love that brand and have an engaged audience and authentically would be a great advocate for the brand. So I think we try and steer clear of that. Although what happens in the communities is that people then create better content, they get better engagement, and then they kind of do become micro-influencers, and then a platform might pick them up. So we don't mind, and that's, you know, that's fine.
Yeah. So, you know, Instagram has been testing this hiding like counts publicly. I can't speak publicly. You guys, what's your reaction to that? There's been all these media reports saying, oh, influencers are in trouble because of this, even though you guys will obviously be able to see the metrics behind the scenes. You know, what effect do you think that this will have, if anything, on your business?
I think it's actually going to be beneficial. I don't know how you feel, but I think it's actually going to be very helpful because we can focus on the content. I know myself and my peers, like, I'll post something and I'll just like obsessively just look at the post until it hits, I don't know, like 1,000 likes or something like that. And I think this will really allow us to just focus on the work that we have to do. It's up and then it's done. And we don't have to really worry about anything that goes up anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think it's very freeing. You can stop kind of tracking how it's doing and instead get back to how I originally started and what I was passionate about, and it was about creating content. And, you know, I'm a creative, and sometimes I shoot things that I think is going to be fantastic, but other people, they just don't like. And I'm measuring my success sometimes on a number, which it shouldn't validate that. I mean, this is not why I started this journey. So I think it will be very freeing, and it will just allow us to go back to, you know, what we were originally passionate about and how we started.
Yeah. You become a prisoner to it sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you'll still be able to see all that detailed metrics behind the scenes.
I know, but nobody else.
It's just for us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's also worth noting, do you guys use Instagram stories very much?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because that's Instagram's fastest growing feature, and that has no public like counts or any public metrics. So it will be interesting. Well, we're going to take questions from the audience in 1 minute, so prepare. But just before we go, you know, if you had to make maybe one prediction in terms of where influencer marketing is going, you know, where do you see it in a couple of years?
Video.
Yeah, like all day.
I would say dark communities. I would say dark social. I think there's a huge return with Gen Z to like being anonymous and being in these private group chats and sharing their thoughts. And I think that's what we're trying to focus on as the next wave of how do brands get insight into those like private closed networks of friends.
I think the next few years we'll finally have someone like seriously compete with Instagram. You know, TikTok is bigger than Instagram, you know, because it's, you can download it in China. But that's, you know, like Vine, it'll be hard for brands to work on a comedy platform and a meme platform. But I do think there'll be a serious competitor to Instagram's dominance in a few years. And I think that, you know, the industry in whole, as it grows, it just become like more commoditized. You know, I think that like naturally prices will start to fall for influencers because there's so much supply that they're going to have to start competing on price. And like any other industry, things will kind of just get normal and boring, and it'll just be a part of things everyone does. And there'll be a new shiny thing that marketers are chasing.
All right, so let's get some questions from the audience. We'll start with you.
Good morning. My name is Lippy Roy. I'm a physician and I specialize in addiction, mindfulness, and nutrition. And there's a real push to get more doctors to really share their information, their experience on social media. I've been really active on social media for years, but I'm trying to increase my Instagram kind of presence. And I've just noticed there's such a yearning in the public about information related to addiction and pain and trauma, loneliness. It impacts everybody. So particularly for the content creators, but really any of you, what are some suggestions you would give to a busy health professional, physician, but also to maximize the time that I have to get that message out there using social media? Thank you.
It's really tough to grow nowadays, and not to discourage you whatsoever, but I have to say that you have to leverage, and by that I mean even possibly going to other professionals and leveraging off one another, maybe doing an Instagram live or teaming up and getting questions from your followers, teaming up with that other professional, and you guys answer those questions together and tackle it that way. You're going to constantly have to do these things in order to grow. Otherwise, just putting yourself out there with content, and it's just such an abundance of content, you're probably going to get overlooked. So my biggest word of advice is just kind of leverage off one another.
I think too, it's important to pinpoint what within your practice is very specific to you. I think whatever you can do to kind of stand out from your peers would really, really help you. And I find with medicine and with psych and loneliness, there are lots of pages just dedicated to quotes. And I see quote pages like with millions of followers, and I get them from my friends all of the time. So if there's anything that you can have in written form that you can just put on a graphic and post, it actually is much easier for you to create content that way. I would recommend doing that as well.
I would say if you start a quote page, double check the sources of the quotes.
And that, yeah.
You will get called out.
Not so much quotes, but more just like little facts and tidbits that you can put in written form, I think would help. Yeah.
All right, next question.
Hi, my name is Jeff Robbins. I teach research writing courses at Rutgers on the corporation and technology. I wonder how influencers is carrying on a long tradition of celebrity, for example, started like the Marlboro Man or virtually all sports stars, Roger Federer advertising coffers and coffee and watches. Is this just a different medium, a different thing, carrying on a long tradition?
Yeah, what's the relation? I think, are you asking what's the differentiation between a celebrity endorsement and that, which has been an industry for a while, versus today's influencer economy?
Yeah, I think that we think about it like the difference between having an audience and having influence, right? Like Roger Federer is really influential. If I want to know what tennis racket to use, I don't give a shit what coffee he drinks, honestly. And so I think that's like where celebrity endorsements are a little hollow, is that they just slap a face that you know on it. But for influencers, they really have built a
Brand.
base of knowledge, and they're educating their audience. So if you're following a beauty influencer and they're giving beauty advice, they're like the Federer of putting foundation on, right? So you trust what they say about that. So I do think it's a little different, and I think that celebrities are struggling to compete in some ways now because they don't know how to build a community. They speak at their audience, not with them, and they are well followed because they're famous, and people like to follow famous people, not because they necessarily care what they say about products. So we generally don't work with people that are celebrities for that reason, because we find influencers so much more effective.
All right, we'll do one more.
Hi, my name's Deval Shah, and I had a question. Do you think there are any negatives for new brands launching who are using influencer marketers exclusively as their go-to-market strategy to come to market?
Good question.
I would say yes, because I think that you really need to do your research and find advocates who are genuinely passionate about your brand. And it's very easy with millions of influencer marketplaces to just lose money and burn money. So I think my position would be build that community, find passion early on. They will always be your advocates, real people.
Yeah, it doesn't work just alone. Like any other form of advertising, you can't just run retargeted Facebook ads and build a brand. It needs to be part of like a much larger marketing stack.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much, Amber, James, Sai, Kelly.